I call this Altoona City Council meeting to order Monday, August 9th, 2021. We will now have a moment of silent prayer. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Linda, would you take the roll call, please?
Vice Mayor Butterbaugh.
Here.
Councilman Kashadi.
Here.
Councilman Carper.
Here.
Councilman Ickes.
Present.
Councilwoman Jordan is absent. Councilman Kelly.
Here.
Mayor Pacifico.
Here. We have a few presentations tonight. The first one is on the Remember 9/11 20th anniversary event, and joining us is Dwayne Bordell and Pastor Gary Dahl.
Thank you, Mayor, members of City Council, and guests. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today to bring all of you up to date in regards to the 20th anniversary and the commemoration of the World Trade Center, Shanksville, and the Pentagon celebrating a 20th anniversary. And with that, I'm presuming that most of you have already seen the large full-page ads that have been displayed in our local news media. And we started the program back in October of 2020. We have a committee of 10 people, and we have been working around the clock in regards to the commemoration, which is going to take place on Saturday night, September the 11th, with the doors opening at 6 p.m. at the Jaffa Shrine Center. And we have engaged the Altoona Youth Orchestra, the Altoona Community Band, and the Hollidaysburg Community Band as entertainment, with James O'Brien, speaker from the Pentagon incident in 2001, when he was in the building when the plane crashed. And we have also his daughter, Kara O'Brien, coming to us from Richmond, Virginia, operatic singer, as well as an acquaintance that most of you probably know, and a country western gentleman from Altoona, Mr. Jim Worthing, coming out of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and an entire program in which we're going to honor our fire, our police, our medical, our military, and our religious leaders. And so I'd like for Gary Dahl to tell you a little bit about our theme and its patriotism, faith, and civic pride.
Thank you, Dwayne, Mr. Mayor, and members of council and others. We've been looking forward to this time, and I don't know how many of you remember 20 years ago. It's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since 9/11 actually took place. And as a matter of fact, I can remember 20 years ago meeting with another group of folks over at the old city council chambers when we talked about what can we do to prevent something like this from happening again. And those are some interesting discussions. But in the last 20 years, I think in many ways we've forgotten what 9/11 was all about, when our country was attacked by those who really do not like us. And so I'm very thankful to have the privilege of working along with Dwayne Bordell. He's been the leader of this particular movement. And our theme this year is faith, patriotism, and civic pride. And when you take those three items, faith, patriotism, and civic pride, those are three pillars upon which our country was founded. And it almost seems to me as though in the last years we have lost those three building blocks of our particular society. We know that there's a lack of respect for each other. There's a lack of respect for police. There's a lack of respect for those who are involved as in the fire industry, the fire department, first responders. I'll get it out here in a moment. And we're kind of hoping and praying that this particular presentation that we have on 9/11 will bring greater respect back into our community. One of the events that we're going to be having that night is a walk of honor, in which we are going to have first responders, police. We're going to be having faith leaders, walk in, and we are going to honor them, not necessarily because of the fact that they were there back on 9/11, but because of who they are. These are individuals who need to have the greatest of all respect, and we have the greatest desire that we can to give them their respect. And so we'd love to have all of you involved. It's not just an Altoona event, but it's a Central Pennsylvania event, and our effort is going to be to increase our faith in God, increase our patriotism and our civic pride to make us a better community, a better state, and a better nation. And we would love to have each and every one of you represented as we gather together that night to honor our great nation and the great God who's brought this nation together for his honor and glory. Thank you very, very much.
In addition to what Gary has told you here, we'd like to call your attention to the fact that our committee has seen fit, in cooperation with 40 corporate sponsors, to have this event be non-chargeable. All admission is complimentary. We've also had our Jaffa Shrine Center not charge for their parking facilities, and we are looking forward to having our fire department on display through the cooperation of Tim Howman and working with Sergeant Matt Plummer of the Altoona Police Department for the festivities itself, and we give a great accolades to the Jaffa Shrine and their committee, their Heather Chesney, who is their coordinator for activities at the shrine. So tickets are located at 11 distribution centers, and they'll be there until several days before the event. Right now we have a capacity of 3,200 seats, general admission, non-reserved seats, and in addition to our people that Gary mentioned as far as our first responders, we have honored guests as well. In addition to that, we've also engaged through video conferencing Rocky Blair from the Pittsburgh Steelers to introduce our first responders for the program. Pam Etters, former executive director of the Altoona Symphony, is our producer. Reverend Gary Dahl is our co-chairman, along with Tony DeGaulle from the Altoona Johnstown Diocese on Public Relations, and Reverend Troy Ferguson from the Transformation Church, along with a gentleman that you all know because of his involvement with military celebrations in Lloyd Peck. And at the same time, we're also bringing on board with us Mr. Joe Keller from Keller Engineers and Rod Molest from Katahdin Computers. We've been meeting monthly since October, and having had a meeting previously with Matt to bring him up to date as to what we're doing. So we encourage everybody to secure your tickets. They're complimentary. The locations are listed in all of our correspondence and our website, which is 911anniversary.com. And we appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to tell you a little bit about our plans and hope that we can fill all 3,200 seats. I'm open for questions, concerns, comments. Okay, thank you very, very much for this opportunity.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Next up, we have our 2020 audit, and joining us is Dan Bradley from Young Oaks and Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Mayor and Council for your continued confidence in our firm. We greatly appreciate the relationship we have with the city. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Strom and the remaining staff of the city for all the assistance they gave us, but most especially Bessie Mosey. So we greatly appreciate all the assistance that was provided to us. For the year ended December 31st, 2020, the city earned what we call an unmodified or a clean opinion, meaning there's no material misstatements contained in your financial statements. I just want to cover some of the numbers that are most relevant to the city. First of all, on page 12, we have our statement of net position. And if you look at the total net position of the city, this actually shows all of your capital assets, the bridges, the roads, the equipment, as well as all the long-term debt, including your net pension liabilities and your OPEB liabilities. Overall equity is a positive $300,443,000 for the city. However, if you look at unrestricted net position, that's actually a negative $46,428,000. Most of that relates to the net pension liability of the city and the OPEB liability, which total about $55 million. On page 13, we have our statement of activities. This is also on the accrual basis of accounting. What that means is we recognize depreciation expense But if you were to buy a piece of capital equipment, it would not show up there because it gets capitalized. As a result, during the current year, 12/31/2020, there was actually a decrease in net assets for the current year of about $9,271,000 in net position for the city. On page 14, we start talking about what we call the fund financial statements. These don't recognize long-term debt. They also don't recognize capital assets. Rather, the focus is on more current type things, that is current assets and current liabilities. On page 14, if you look at the general fund, you'll notice the overall general fund balance is about $9,415,000, of which about $6.7 million is unrestricted. If you look at total fund balance in the total column, it's about $32,591,000. However, most of that is restricted in some way for projects or for future capital expenditures. Going on to page 16, the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. In the general fund, there was a positive change in fund balance for the year of about $2,770,000. Overall fund balance increased by $7,261,000. The largest part of the city's report is actually the notes to the financial statements. That's pages 20 through 91. So about 71 pages is notes to your financial statements. Of those notes, about 33 pages relate to two things: your net pension liability and your OPEB liability. These are contained on pages 40 through 73. The next section of your audit report is what we call RSI, Required Supplementary Information. There's about 28 pages of information there that deal again with net pension liabilities and OPEB. Again, the Governmental Accounting Standard Board, which dictates what has to be reported in your audit report, really feels strongly that that information is most important, and that's why you see it taking up so much of your notes, and also why we have the required supplementary information. On pages 121 through 123, we have the budget to actual comparison for the general fund, and you'll notice that the final budget actually showed that we had budgeted an increase in fund balance for the year of about $134,000, when the actual fund balance increased by about $2,770,000, which is a very positive sign for the city. It shows the city is being very conservative in their spending, and they were also able to collect most of the budgeted revenues. So again, I see that as a very positive sign. On page 128, we have our listing of federal financial expenditures. During the current year, the city expended about $2,275,000 of federal financial assistance. We had to look at two programs this year, the CDBG program as well as the hazard mitigation grant. And the good thing about those is we had no audit findings related to your single audit. But on pages 130 through 133, we have our government auditing standards and our uniform guidance, compliance report, and internal control report. And then immediately after that, on pages 134 and 139, we have our schedule of findings and question costs. There were 5 findings related to your financial statement audit, but there were no findings related to your single audit. If there's any questions at all about the audit report, I'd be more than happy to answer them at this time. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dan. All right, next up is the mid-year financial report by Bessie Mosey, Acting Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is the 2021 mid-year financial review. This graph shows how the budgeted revenue are broken down according to the budget. You will notice that the upper right-hand corner, the real estate tax is 31% of our budgeted revenue. The earned income is 13% of our budgeted revenue. The Act 511 tax.
Yeah, we can't hear you. There you go.
Okay. The Act 511 taxes are at 4% of our budgeted or 8% of our budgeted revenue. And between 5 and 6 o'clock, the business license at 4%. Moving to the top left, you'll see charges for services is at 20%, and the biggest component in that is the water authority payment that we will receive at the end of the year. Moving down right below that is the interfund transfers at 12%, and below that, the government grants at 10%. This chart shows the breakdown of the revenue received through mid-year 2021. As you can see to the right, the real estate tax revenue makes up about 52% of our revenue. Moving over right off of that is the earned income tax at 8% of our mid-year revenues, and the Act 511 taxes are 7% of our mid-year revenue receipts. The top left-hand corner is our interfund transfers, which came in at 10%. Right below that is the government grants, the charges for services for 3%. As you can see from this graph, our 2021 mid-year revenues are up overall from 2020. To the left, you can see the real estate taxes are up about $500,000 compared to 2020. Moving across, you will notice that all other revenue are up, except the interfund transfers, which are down slightly in 2021. The reason for that being our MMOs have decreased a little in 2021. This graph provides more detail of the comparison of revenue by category through mid-year 2021. These are also provided in more detail in the revised spreadsheet you received this evening. This graph provides more detail of the revenue received year over year. Just some highlights for the mid-year revenue are our real estate tax receipts were up about $500,000 from the previous year. Our earned income tax revenue is up through mid-year, but only slightly, a little over $30,000. The gross receipt taxes, real estate transfer tax and business privilege tax, are higher through mid-year. However, our local services tax have decreased approximately $84,800. Our revenue from charges for service is up a little over $330,000, due mainly to the gas and water authority restoration fees. The interest income is significantly lower in 2021. The reason for that being we liquidated some stocks in 2020 due to an audit finding. Our intergovernmental revenue is down slightly, a little over $261,000. Federal grant receipts are much higher through mid-year because of the large grant received in 2021 for the 2019-2020 AFG radio grant. Our net revenue receipts through mid-year are a little over $2.1 million more than 2020. This graph shows the 2021 budgeted expenditures. You can see 57% of our budget is for the public safety, which includes police, fire, and codes department. The public works department comes in at 15%. The debt service is 11%, and administration, which includes all the other expenses, is at 17%. This graph shows the 2021 expenditures at mid-year through broad categories. The public safety expenditures at mid-year are at 67%. The public works expenditures through mid-year are at 14%. The debt services at 3%, and administration at 16%. This is another chart that just shows the 2021-2020 mid-year expenditure comparison. You can see public safety has increased in 2021, and that is the expenditure for the grant that they received. Public Works and Administration are slightly lower, and debt service is a little higher due to the bond payment that we had to make for the money we borrowed last year. This is the 2021 mid-year actual versus 2020 mid-year actual. And these are provided in more detail with the spreadsheet that was provided tonight also. This graph shows the expenditures through mid-year 2021 versus 2020. And as you can see on this graph, the largest increase in expenditures is the fire department. And again, that is the grant that we received for the radios. This is just another graph of the total revenue versus total expenditures for 2021 versus 2020 mid-year. Our total revenue for 2021 has increased over 2020 as our expenditures also increased due to, once again, the grant received through the fire department for the radios. The 2021 mid-year highlight expenditures are the public safety related expenditures accounted for 67% of all of the expenditures through mid-year. The reason for that being the grant related expenditure. Our OPEB set aside has not yet been transferred in 2021, and due to the repayment schedule, the vast majority of debt service payments occur in the second half of the year. Even though staffing levels have been reduced in certain departments, but these expenditure reductions are somewhat offset by reduction in force-related payments that were made in early 2021. Our 2021 expenditures at mid-year are higher than last year in terms of total dollars and percentage of budget. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bessie.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the Codes and Inspections Department Annual Report by Rebecca Brown, Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to present to you the 2020 Annual Report for the Department of Codes and Inspections. First, I'd like to recognize our department staff. Myself, we have our Inspector Scott Brown, 5 Code Enforcement Officers, Brian Detweiler, Paul DeVeglia, Blaine Barefoot, Sean Beatty, Scott Campanero, our GIS Land Use Coordinator Sabrina Appel McMillan, Senior Customer Service Specialist Megan Klein, and Customer Service Specialist Angelina Capriotti Long, I'm sorry. Certifications and training, all of the employees, all of the staff, we are all required to attend classes to become recertified. That includes myself, I'm the building inspector, who has 14 certifications. Each of our code enforcement officers are certified property maintenance and housing inspectors. Some of the department functions, inspections, code enforcement, rental inspections, permits and licensing, land use, land development, zoning, and GIS. In addition to the inspections, code enforcement, and licensing functions, last year, land development, zoning, and GIS functions were added to the department. The city's building inspector reviews plans. He conducts residential and commercial inspections and issues certificates of occupancy. Middle Department Inspection Agency is our third-party agency that still conducts our commercial plan reviews. We still follow the 2015 codes. The 2018 codes will be adopted in early 2022. This is highlights the number of permits that have been issued from 2019 to 2020. The comparison, 2020, we did see slightly lower permit numbers issued, and our estimated construction value is down about $3 million from 2019. Permits by type. Obviously, most of our permits are building at 58%. Next, electrical at 19%, plumbing at 15%, mechanical at 5%, and demolition at 3%. Out of the building permits, 89% are residential and 11% came in at commercial. This highlights the major construction projects, the commercial projects valued at $100,000 or more. You can see the mill, the new investment savings bank, Station Medical Center renovations, UPMC Altoona, the school district administrative offices, the new Sheets on East 25th, Amtran, Sheets Plank Road, Chronics, and the car wash at Pleasant Valley Boulevard. These slides just highlight some of the large projects that we've seen in the city. The Greystone Grand Palazzo, that's a huge transformation to that building, and it's an excellent example of an adaptive reuse of a structure. The former hospital is almost unrecognizable. Those are other angles. It's a beautiful building. The mill. The mill is another good example of an adaptive reuse. And that slide actually shows what is an interesting element, the restoration of the smokestack. The Altoona Area High School. This is the beginning stages of construction, and that is the finished product, one of the angles. And that also shows the bridge to the renovated A building and also to the new intramural field. The new investment savings bank, Levity Brewery, and the Vipon building are, Levity Brewery opened last year, and the former Vipon building is undergoing renovation currently. The new Blair County Community Action Building, the administrative offices for the school district, which are housed in the former investment savings and loan. New residential construction, lower than it has been for several years. We only had 2 new homes constructed. It wasn't surprising last year due to COVID, but we did get 2. And the one is still actually under construction, and the completed new home is shown at the bottom. Plumbing, electrical, mechanical permits, they have all, actually, we've seen an increase. We saw an increase in 2020 from 2019. The most increase was for the electrical permits. This map shows the code enforcement officers' areas. You'll notice that, and this is moving on to the code enforcement function now. There's 5 geographical areas for code enforcement. And I know that some appear smaller than others. This is due to historically the complaints we receive in a given area. The size is based on the number of violations historically observed in each area. This chart just represents our process. The flow of these actions appears to be fairly simple. However, with many violations, this is just not the case. They can get stuck in a holding pattern, especially at the magistrate level with deceased owners, absentee owners, and properties tied up in litigation. When a property transfers ownership, we are required to begin the enforcement process over. Violations, 4,505 violations identified in 2020. You'll see that garbage and overgrowth are at the top of the violation list. Next are repairs, unregistered rentals, furniture, vacant properties, and miscellaneous, which really includes snow removal, trees, brush piles, etc. It's important to note that our code officers not only respond to complaints, but also monitor their areas proactively as well. We did see in 2020, inspections and re-inspections slightly increased from 2019. Fines assessed decreased, but summary citations did increase, and most importantly, overall compliance did increase. Citations and hearings. The code officers, we have code court the first Thursday of every month. We're actually having code court probably twice, if not 3 times a month now, to catch up from the COVID delay with court. They attended approximately 700 hearings in 2020. 2 or more guilty convictions can proceed to Blair County Court for misdemeanor charges. And right now, we have over 350 active summary citations for noncompliance. This is our mow and lien program. This was established in 2015. The properties must be vacant, unoccupied, and abandoned. We had 60 properties mowed in 2020. We have a little more than that already this year, which hopefully the mow program's coming to an end soon. We then filed the liens for the cost of the service. This just shows you some of the properties that are abandoned. And one thing it's important to note also, though, is we're also, in addition to the privately owned vacant properties, the city's responsible for the maintenance of some properties in the Blair County Repository. An act that passed in August of 2018 stated that a county does not have an obligation for the maintenance of any nuisance remediation for a tax delinquent property. So we had to add at least a half a dozen properties onto our list for nuisance abatement purposes for the mow and lien program.
Rebecca, it's Jesse.
Hi.
Do we get reimbursed through the county through that?
We do not.
Thank you.
Moving on to blighted properties, we had 29 we had 29 properties submitted to the blight program in 2020. The blight status is reserved for properties after all other options are exhausted. Blighted and condemned mean 2 different things. They can be confusing to people. When a property is condemned, it's often temporary. It's a lack of utilities, unsanitary conditions, life safety issues, maybe severe infestations. Blighted properties generally are unable to be rehabilitated. They can cause an imminent danger to the public, building collapse, falling bricks, maybe a structure fire, unstable and deteriorating abandoned property. I had some pictures included, but I figured that you didn't need to see those. Residential rental unit inspection program. Our inspections are conducted once every 3 years. Minimum standards set forth in the 2015 International Property Maintenance Code are what we follow. The most common violations for rental properties are smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, GFI outlets, handrails on the stairs, and openable windows. We give 10 days to comply for life safety violations, but 45 days for all other violations that require repair. Here you'll notice the number of rentals we have in the city. We have 3,723 rental properties licensed in the city. That contains 7,261 rental units. Obviously, most of our rentals are 1-unit buildings coming in at 2,511. Next would be duplex at 645, and 5-unit or more is 355 buildings. This graph shows, or this map, shows the location of the rental properties in the city. So you can see that they're primarily concentrated in the center of the city. The shaded purple are 1 or 2-unit rentals, but you'll notice the concentration is in the center of the city, which also includes the yellowish red areas. They indicate that there would be an apartment building with a number of units. Rental inspections, we conducted 2,488 inspections in 2020. It's important to note that we did suspend rental inspections twice during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic. When rental inspections resumed, our officers were required to utilize their PPE during inspections. We also put in additional safeguards in place with health questionnaires to owners and tenants, and we made them mask as well. Next on to licensing certificates and registrations. This shows the plumber, electrician, contractor licenses issued in 2020. Mechanical amusement device, 52 establishments containing 250 mechanical devices. We inspect those once a year. Sexually oriented business license, we had 129 new businesses privilege licenses issued, 55 for closed properties, and 130 vacant property registrations. The next slide shows that our boards. We have a plumbing and electrical examiners board. This was, the makeup of this board was changed slightly in 2020. We did have 2 separate boards for each trade. They had 14 meetings in 2020. They review applications for licensing and one-time permits. Our Code Appeals Board had 5 meetings in 2020. They review appeals to the city's codes and adopted ordinances. Next is the land development, zoning, and GIS functions. The Altoona City Planning Commission. We have 7 members on our Planning Commission. The Planning Commission, it's important to note, they were founded in 1916. They're responsible for the review and final approval of subdivisions and land developments. They also declare properties blighted and have assisted with long-range planning and land use planning efforts. The 2020 land development and subdivisions, we had 8 land developments and 5 subdivisions. The most major land developments, we had Dazzling Realty on North 4th Avenue, Cavi Partnership, which is our Green Bean Coffee, our new location, the Nehemiah Project Townhouses, Curry Realty, and the Car Wash in Pleasant Valley. The next slide shows the local economic revitalization tax assistance area, which is LRTA. This is an incentive zone. Basically, the LRTA program encourages revitalization and new construction in the city of Altoona. Properties that qualify for this are exempt from real property tax, and a gradual increase in tax payments for any LRTA property is applied. Any property owner that's in the designated area, which is shaded in red, can apply for LRTA. Next is our zoning, the zoning functions. Zoning regulates activities and land use setbacks in the 11 zoning districts of the city. You'll see them shaded on the graph. Zoning requires review, research, and enforcement, such as building and sign permits, business licenses, and quite a few inquiries and designations. The Zoning Hearing Board, we have had 12 appeals filed in 2020. Most of them were for a non-conforming use. Next up is our student homes. We currently have 170 licensed student homes in the city. And as you can see from the map, primarily they're located at the north end of the city, which would be near the campus. Student homes must be approved for placement, distance, and parking regulations as defined in the ordinance. Next is our Geographic Information Systems, which is otherwise known as GIS. The GIS and Land Use Coordinator handles all duties relating to data management, geographic analysis, and works closely with other departments for their mapping needs. She also maintains our parcel database, which operates out of BSNA and works very closely with the Blair County Assessment Office. Next is a little about how we've connected with the community in 2020. We are part of Operation Our Town, the Housing Roundtable Committee. We are coming up on our 3rd annual community cleanup day. And local agencies where we've provided assistance include Blair Senior Services, Blair County Children and Youth, the Altoona Housing Authority, and Blair County Community Action Agency. Looking forward, we hope to continue our positive contact with citizens through reminders, announcements, and bulletins made available on the city's website and public access channel. We've also created a department Facebook page that was primarily created during COVID to notify people of permits and inspections cancellations. We hope to continue our proactive code enforcement approach established in 2017 with sweeps and city programs and services. And that concludes my report. I would just like to close by thanking my staff for their hard work and dedication during an extremely difficult year. And I'd also like to thank the other department heads for their cooperation and assistance during the past year. Thank you.
I did have a couple of questions.
Sure.
When you go back to the number of violations, and you had vehicles, what types of vehicles are they, and
We actually handle anything that's on private property, not on a street.
okay,
So anything on private property, if it's inoperable, if it has, it's really more than just a registration. It would be a flat tire, bus, anything that makes it not be able to run. That's an inoperable vehicle.
okay, so if it actually would be in the street in the right of way, then that would fall to the police department then, okay. That was one question. The total number of violations were 4,000?
4,502, I think.
I'm curious as to how many properties that might be. And I don't know if you've done.
I didn't actually, I mean,
know. I'm sorry. I'm
that's
not trying to
pretty
play
easy
stuff
to do,
Dan,
but there was a lot of,
It's a
there's
lot
a
of
lot of-
violations. I just didn't know, I mean, and I'm sure there's a lot of properties that have multiple violations.
well, that's generally the case. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times the overgrowth and the garbage and trash, they'll be single complaints or single violations. But when it comes to repairs, vacant properties, we have multiple complaints on one property.
Right. The final question I had was, you had 772 re-inspections on rentals.
So when we go out and do an inspection, again, we give them 10 days for life safety issues and then 45 days for all other repairs. Safety issues would include if they wouldn't have a smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector, something of that nature. When we let them know what the problem is and what they need to do to the rental, we assign a reinspection date.
Okay.
So that's what that is.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
That's a lot of city to cover for your department, and the first thing I noticed there when you did the number on your staff, that's covering approximately 10 square miles, and sometimes we forget the county has about 66,000 assessed properties and 22,000 of them are in the city, and so that's a lot of property to cover and a lot of different things. One of the things I wanted to mention at the last meeting and forgot about it, you guys really did a good job updating our zoning map. You could go to our city website, you can go into any property, get the information, what zone it's in, owner data, different odds and ends, and we actually have an excellent GIS map, and so to see that come to fruition, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. We will move on to public comment now. If anybody would like to address council, you may do so by going to the podium, stating your name and address for the record, and please keep your comments to 5 minutes.
Hello, my name's Steve Morrissey. I own and operate a shaved ice truck here in the city of Altoona with my wife for the last 32 years. And I've had some concerns over the food truck rules that had come up. And it was parking 50 feet from a residential building. Okay. We'll drive down the street. This is Maple Avenue and 4th Street. I'll drive down Maple Avenue here and I'll ring my bell. And I'll stop in the middle of this. And it is within 50 feet of a house here. And if I couldn't stop here, I'd have to pull across 4th Street to like in front of Dick's Pharmacy here. And that I do not want children running across the street chasing after me. It's a safety concern. That's my biggest concern with parking within 50 feet of a residential house. These are the size of our normal customers, right here, children. And I do not want them running across any busy intersections. That's what I had to say. Do you have any questions or?
Hey, thanks a lot for coming tonight and sharing that with us. I don't know if the food truck ordinance is going to rear up anymore or not, but I do believe we did mention at the last meeting that snow cones and ice cream trucks would be exempt. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We
And I also believe, to Councilman Butterball's point, that the 50-foot radius, et cetera, was something that this governing body didn't have much of an appetite for.
Yes.
A lot of the houses aren't even 50 feet away from each other across the street.
Yeah, so the ordinance that was proposed at the last meeting was a draft.
Okay.
And I think, if I recall, I think everybody up here expressed some concern with a few of the proposed changes, including the 50-foot from the residential. If I think I'm remembering that correctly, that there was that most of us, if not all of us, took issue with that particular clause.
Well, that was all.
Yeah, I did receive a number of calls and concerns from folks just like you about that, especially from the snow cone and ice cream truck folks. So really appreciate you sharing, especially going out of your way to make the exhibits there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Dustin Rhodes, owner of Rhodes Curbside Creamery, the ice cream truck. Just wanted to make it known that I will not be out operating until I know definitively how this is going to play out. I need to buy new equipment for on my truck, and I'm just not going to spend the money if I'm not going to be able to operate. So I just want to make it known. So.
Yeah, well, I believe we're clear that snow cone and ice cream is not included in this ordinance. If we do something food truck wise, it would be pretty much, I guess, for like prepared cooked foods, things of that nature.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how the rest of
I
these
think-
guys think, but there's no way
Yeah,
I'm going to
there's-
be in the city of Altoona voting against ice cream and snow cones.
Yeah,
under
we already
any-
got hammered on social media from
Yeah.
everybody, and we've said from day one that was never going to be considered. But I appreciate you coming in, and it would be
It's hard to read it and then,
yeah.
the
Understand, and it's your livelihood, and I appreciate that. But we're not trying to put you out of business, no matter what I read on Facebook.
Yeah.
Or the Altoona Mayor.
Yeah. So. Yeah, no, but yeah, seriously, and I'm sorry we caused you heartburn over that, but it was never the intent that would be included in that. And just to be clear, and I'm not, but you said proposed, I would even just say draft. There's nothing that's, we haven't introduced anything or anything like that, so, okay, so.
And at work sessions, sometimes, like this is a regular voting council meeting, which is our first meeting of the month, and the second meeting on the fourth Monday, that's typically a work session where we'll just go through like Councilman Kelly was saying. There may be a draft ordinance that we look at or different odds and ends, but that's just something more of a brainstorming or seeing if there's something we can improve. So this one sort of got away real quick, and then with the article. But tomorrow's headline we're hoping reads ice cream truck. Ice cream trucks and snow cone trucks will not be part of any food ordinance. How's that sound?
I just don't.
Hold on, let Bill finish typing that.
I just envision little kids picketing my house, and I really.
I didn't even
Not-
have to leave the house. My
Yeah.
son was picketing in the living room.
So.
Just imagine one of them running across the street.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
what we don't want. I mean, so, like I said, the picture. I grew up on Maple Avenue, up from Dick's Pharmacy, so I know that real well.
Yep.
Yeah, so, and it's a steep hill too. That's the other thing. Trying to stop, so.
Hi.
Hi, everybody. I'm here with my daughter. She wants me to be her voice. She, in April, purchased a home at,
I'm sorry, could you state your name, please?
oh, sure, Judith Weinstein. My daughter, Crystal Crothers, bought a house at 113 West 11th Avenue in the Juniata section of Altoona in April. Next door at 111 West 11th Avenue, there is a home that has been vacant for at least 20 years that we know of. I'm not a professional, but we would consider it blighted under the circumstances. She did speak to somebody at Code, I believe it was Rebecca. I realize you're all very busy in Altoona, no disrespect, but somebody was supposed to get back to her in May and hasn't as of yet, and supposed to like stay in touch by email or whatever. Bottom line, my daughter keeps a clean house. There's 2 children that live there. My other daughter lives there. So there's a 9-year-old girl and there's a 13-year-old girl and there's the 2 daughters. So there's mice coming from next door. The man across the street has seen them. He has them too. I don't know if any other neighbors have seen anything in their homes. I guess a mouse jumped out on my one granddaughter the other day. The houses are like basically butt up against each other. You can't even get between them for repairs or anything. The roof on the 111 property is probably like basically totally off. The day my daughter got her key and went there, we had had a storm and there was roofing with nails all over her porch and everywhere. There was no spouting on the side that faces her house. I inspected it, and it's supposed to come down and hit through a French drain and drain out the curb, but it's all detached and it's all stuffed up, and the main part is completely down. It's in the backyard, which is a forest, about 4 feet high right now, and her basement gets flooded. There's trees in the backyard that are totally dead, that are probably gonna fall. And the list just goes on, and we just basically wanna know how somebody can get in there to see the extent of the damage. You can tell that the ceilings and the walls are caving in, and it's just very frustrating.
Do we do interior I guess that would be fire,
Yeah,
but not really. We don't do that residentially.
it's an owner occupied, I mean, it's a privately owned residence, so we're not permitted to go inside
Okay.
and inspect. I mean, we do have a citation issued against the owner of the property. We've had our mowing contractor down there at least 2 or 3 times this year to try to get a hold of the overgrowth because it is in our mow and lean program. I've personally spoken with the owner. I don't know that they plan on doing much with the property. But we do have citations issued at the magistrate, as well as, fines assessed for noncompliance.
And that's about really all we can do, as much as I hate to
I mean,
say it. but-
if it was an absent, I guess it is an absentee owner, but we know, the whereabouts of the owner, and it's a local owner. So, it's a matter of coming before the magistrate and finding out, how she'll be charged, and then where we go from there. And I think the citation was filed the first week of June. We don't have a hearing date yet. Hasn't,
Should she be notified of the hearing to be present?
absolutely. We encourage that.
Yeah, one of the things I've been encouraging folks to do is find out when the hearing is, and when you get that notification, to make sure they show up, because really the magistrates control the blight, and if they're just going to slap people on the wrist, or sometimes though it depends on the magistrate, it depends on the situation, and so it would really help the cause if you have a structure like this in your neighborhood or a property like this, to, if you can, go to the hearing and testify, so that gives our magistrate a little more information and a little more discernment on how to handle the situation.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Victor, is there anybody on the phone? No. No? Okay, we'll close the floor for public comment and move on to the resolutions.
Item A is approving the minutes of the Altoona City Council meeting held Monday, July 12th, 2021. Item B is amending the 2020 CDBG program, transferring $160,540.76 from the completed Washington Avenue storm drainage installation project, with $130,160 allocated to the 2020 blighted property program and $30,380.76 allocated to the 2020 single-family rehabilitation program. Also canceling the 2020 Catholic Charities Emergency Financial Assistance Project at their request, transferring $10,000 to the single-family rehabilitation program. Item C is approving a repository bid in the amount of $250 submitted by Jacob Friedenberger for property located at 410 11th Street, Altoona, and further authorizing the city manager to execute the taxing district form. Item D is approving a repository bid in the amount of $250 submitted by Donna Backmeyer for property located at 911 First Avenue, Altoona, and further authorizing the city manager to execute the taxing district form. Item E is approving a repository bid in the amount of $200 submitted by Bobby Fleck of Altoona for property located at 1609 17th Avenue, and further authorizing the city manager to execute the taxing district form. Item F is awarding the 2021 asphalt joint and crack seal project to Russell Standard Corporation of Fayetteville, Pennsylvania, in the amount of $48,180 payable from Highway Aid, and further authorizing the city manager to execute all documents and the city clerk or deputy city clerk to attest to same. Item G is awarding the curb and sidewalk revitalization project, Broadway, East Fairview Avenue to West 14th Avenue project, to Midstate Construction of Altoona in the amount of $218,996 payable from capital funds, and further authorizing the city manager to execute all documents and the city clerk to attest to same. Are there any additions or deletions or anything that needs to be pulled for a separate vote? Hearing none, I will call for the consent vote. Councilman Kashadi, you will need to unmute yourself for the vote. You have yourself muted. Vice Mayor Butterball?
Yes.
Councilman Kashadi? Councilman Carper?
Yes.
Councilman Ickes?
Yes.
Councilwoman Jordan is absent. Councilman Kelly?
Yes.
Mayor Pacifico?
Yes.
Councilman Kashadi? And vote passes 5-0. The ordinance on the agenda for introduction is an ordinance of the City of Altoona, Blair County, Pennsylvania, which amends Chapter 800-42 of the Altoona City Code as it pertains to small wireless facilities, and creates new Chapter 595 of the Altoona City Code titled Small Wireless Facilities, relating to permitting, placement, installation, and standards for small cell wireless communication facilities in the public rights-of-way. Is there a council member willing to introduce this ordinance?
So moved.
This ordinance was introduced by Vice Mayor Butterball. And we have a second ordinance for adoption, which was introduced by Councilman Ickes, and it is an ordinance of the City of Altoona, Blair County, Pennsylvania, creating Chapter 289 demolition or partial demolition of buildings and other structures, providing definitions, administration, procedures, and regulations, enforcement.
So moved.
Second.
This ordinance was moved for adoption by Councilman Carper and seconded by Mayor Pacifico. And I will call the roll for a vote. Vice Mayor Butterbaugh,
Yes.
Councilman Kashadi, Councilman Carper,
Yeah. Yes.
Councilman Ickes,
Yes.
Councilwoman Jordan is absent, Councilman Kelly,
Yes.
Mayor Pacifico,
Yes.
and the vote passes 5-0.
Okay, we'll move on to city manager updates. Omar?
Yes, I want mayor and council to know that I will be sending out a letter to the superintendent for the school district requesting that the school district pay half of the indirect costs associated with providing school crossing guards to the school district. This is something that was discussed with them, them being the administration of the school district on a couple of different occasions. The most recent was towards the end of the school year. I just want everybody to be aware that it was something that I believe was agreed upon in principle. So we're going to move forward with that now that we are about 2 weeks from actually being back into school, or the kids being back in school. Also, I'm updating a process for the disposition of city-owned parcels. We've received some interests on multiple parcels. I've actually engaged a real estate agent to appraise those parcels, which is part of the process that I'd like to set up here, so that we get an appraisal of the value of the property, and we get a statement of purpose from the bidder or bidders. We get an actual bid for the purchase, and that we before we enter into a final sale. And if that's something we want to discuss further before we implement that process, I'm in favor of that. But we get these bids, or we get these interested parties, and there's really no process in place right now that I can see to dispatch of those properties.
Omar, what are the parcels? Can you say that?
There's one. I know one of them for sure is right up we're by the old Prince of Peace church that was demolished probably about 4 or 5 years ago. The school district has notified me of their interest in purchasing the property.
Are these like vacant properties?
Yes, all of these are. Now, that's not to say that all the ones that will be undertaken for sale will be, but these 3 that I'm talking about right now are. We can actually bring it up at the work session if you'd like to talk about it more in
Yeah, that-
detail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be good work session
Yeah,
material.
I agree.
Okay. And the last thing I wanted to mention was that I'm in the early stages of updating the inventory of commercial properties and businesses in the city to try to facilitate potential redevelopment of those properties. I'm sure you all are aware, there are a lot of empty buildings that, had a commercial purpose at one time. I talked with the folks at ABCD Corp., and they have a partial inventory. I think it would benefit the city to be on top of knowing what is eligible and available for redevelopment. And so I'm at the very early stages of moving in that direction. I wanted the council to know that.
And I'm guessing you guys have like an interior, for lack of a better way to put it, GIS that you can zoom into or whatever, look up the properties and see like all the data, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be something we go about do some field work to say, okay, well, you know, we can see clearly that this building is vacant. And yeah, we'll absolutely, once we have the inventory, be able to update the information in a GIS function and present it to whomever may be interested. That's all I have.
Thank you. We'll move on to council discussion items. Councilman Kelly?
Just want to say thank you to the Altoona Police Department on the night out. I mean, I thought that was a wonderful evening and very well attended. It was a beautiful evening. I know we had not just the police department, but participation from the fire department, public works, dog law enforcement, and who else am I missing? I mean, it was just, and a lot of community agencies as well.
Yeah, everyone really helped out organizing and even helped set up, so I really appreciate everyone's help on it.
Well, it was really nice, and I just wanted to thank you for that. Did Sergeant Plummer give the horseback? I mean, he looked really good up there. And
Yeah, I had some concerns, but he eventually
okay,
gave it
he
back.
didn't ride it home then. Okay.
I said no to the mounted unit.
Okay, but thank you. I just thought that was a great evening for the community, and I thank everybody who was involved in putting that together. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Carper?
I have nothing to add. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Butterbaugh?
I was just thinking for the work session, if we do want to re-look, because I know I got calls in both directions for the food truck ordinance. Really about the only ones that I got for it were people concerned about more of some of the food trucks or tents where they didn't have running water, where there was a lack of cleanliness or things of that nature. Between that and another thing I was getting a lot of calls on was like animals. I guess more people are buying chickens and things like that, which are fine when they're left on their own property, but apparently there's some ambiguity on free range in certain areas of the city. And I'd like to know if that's something we need to address or if that's something that can be looked up and found what exactly is the rules, the existing rules, or what do we need to do to at least give Mr. Diversa a little bit of opportunity there to be able to enforce.
And roosters.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a joke. I mean, we have a problem now with people who've purchased roosters, and neighbors love that.
Yeah, and for years they were told no roosters and X number of hens, and you had to keep them penned in, but apparently we're having a hard time finding where that rule originated or where it is. And so if we need to, I would be for at least adopting a minimal ordinance, and then if we need to add on it in the future, instead of taking the time and copying like another town's ordinance and trying to perfect it all at once, maybe just something minimal like, okay, keep your animals, whatever they are, on your property, and we could go from there and work on that perhaps at the next work session also.
I think when Rebecca had brought up the draft ordinance that we reviewed for food trucks, it was at least driven in part by the fact that we have one or two food trucks that are claimed to be food trucks that actually are not mobile. So they really turn out to be a restaurant in somebody's backyard. So I think that was really the impetus for the discussion to move forward.
And the other issue there, they were already had rules against that from other like zoning, and I thought the zoning hearing board did a really good job with that. By the way, with one of them, I thought the way they did that was very fair to everybody involved, gave them a little bit of time there, and I was really pleased to see that. These authorities and boards are important, and to see the work that the folks do that are on them, they do really good work.
Thank you. Councilman Kashadi?
Still muted.
Okay. Councilman Ickes?
Nothing at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to remind everybody that the Altoona Community Cleanup Day that Rebecca alluded to during her report earlier is coming up on Saturday, August 28th from 9 a.m. to noon. And if anybody is interested, you can register by emailing info@unitedwayofblaircounty.org by Friday, August 14th. We'll be cleaning the blocks and avenues and streets between 6th Avenue to 3rd Avenue, between 8th Street and 12th Street, doing basic projects like just cleaning up the garbage and debris from the streets, pulling weeds, trimming bushes, shrubs, stuff like that. So if anybody's interested, it's a good opportunity for church groups to get involved, or other clubs like Rotary, Kiwanis, those sorts of things. Thank you. And we'll move on to questions from the media now.
Thank you. Omar, the crossing guard issue, can you say where that came, like, where'd that come from, or give me a little brief history of that?
Well, the city and the school district currently share the direct costs, so the cost of paying wages for school crossing guards. But there are a lot of administrative costs that the city alone pays. So we investigated this last year, discussed it with the district on at least one other occasion, and we're going to move forward as we move closer to the beginning of school to hopefully get compliance with the district to pay half of those indirect costs as well.
Like, how much money approximately are you talking about?
Probably about 50% of what the actual direct costs are, so probably in the neighborhood of $30,000.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of costs, though, are you talking about?
Costs for, everybody in administration, from the police department where the school guards reside, or under the auspices of the police department. The crossing guard coordinator, the clothing that they use, the administrative issues in HR, which I'm all too familiar with, related to crossing guards, and negotiation of their collective bargaining agreements and so forth. There's costs associated with that we would like to share, the school district to share in those costs.
Half and half?
Yes.
Okay. Omar, again, you were talking about, I wasn't quick enough to catch what you started with. When you talk about the 3 parcels that you're concerned about, like, what kind of parcels do you mean?
They're all vacant parcels, and again, we're going to bring that up at a future work session to talk about the process to really address. We're made aware of interest in purchasing those parcels by interested entities in the community. We don't really have a set process in place that I'm aware of to move forward, and I think at least part of that process has to include, what's the interest of the individual in the property, and what their planned use of that property would be. But again, that's going to be a subject for a future work session.
And would that also include the need for an appraisal? Did you say that?
Yes, because, we don't know the value of the property unless we have it appraised. So, somebody might want to pay $200 for a parcel that's worth, $2,000, for example.
And are you talking about, like, any parcel that the city would have ownership of, or?
Again, Bill, it's going to be the subject of a work session, but yes, that's what I'm talking about. It would be any parcel that someone in the community has come forward and wanted to purchase.
And would that include the repository?
No,
Parcels?
they're not city-owned parcels.
Okay. And the next thing you said, talked about, that's my next question. The inventory, what led to that thought, I guess, to do that inventory?
Well, I spend a lot of time driving around the city, and I'm sometimes not, I'm underwhelmed, I should say, by the amount of buildings that are just vacant and, former businesses that are there to be developed. Obviously, the city is in partnership to some degree with the Altoona Blair County Development Corporation for redevelopment of those parcels. Other than driving around and seeing them, I can't look at a list to say, okay, yes, we know exactly what those parcels are, where they're at, and what their potential reuse is. So the inventory would be the basis for then putting it into, a GIS system whereby we could look at that on a map. We could provide a lot of parcel data for anybody that may be interested in the redevelopment of those parcels.
Would that sort of be related to what the previous thing we were talking about? The
No, I'm really talking about, these are existing buildings that the city doesn't own.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Let's see. This, I guess, is for Tom. How would it be difficult legally, I guess, in an ordinance to separate ice cream trucks and snow cone trucks from regular food trucks, or is that?
I think, any ordinance, just how particularly you craft it. And I think, as was alluded to earlier, there was a certain situation that kind of brought this food truck situation to the forefront, where it's a food truck, but it's not being operated as a food truck, so to speak. And I think, when you just bring in a draft ordinance, it's a starting point. It's just to kind of, provide counsel, hey, here's kind of a general parameters of what an ordinance dealing with this issue could look like. And, as any good counsel will do, they talk about it, they say, yeah, we like this, we don't like that. You try to come up with something to basically address the issue you're looking to address, as opposed to being overly broad with it. So yeah, I think, working with counsel, I think we can come up with something.
That would not apply to food trucks, and the food truck people wouldn't be able to say, hey, you're discriminating against us.
I think we can be able to address it. I think we can address what everyone's major concerns are in that area.
And I guess this is for Matt, maybe, do you expect action soon on the food truck ordinance, or is this something that's kind of just sitting there for a while, or?
Why was that directed to me?
Because you're the mayor, that's why.
No, I don't think that it's anything that council will be doing anything on anytime soon.
Oh, and this, I'm not sure who would answer this, but the audit, Dan Bradley was saying there were 5 findings, financial findings. Could somebody list those?
Yeah, a couple of them, Bill, are recurring findings that we have in there every year related to a minimal staff that addresses, the financial aspects of the city. So some of them are recurring. There were a couple new ones in relation to, really directly related to a change in staffing that we had within the community development department that led to some issues that were findings were, that the auditor had findings for. We've met with the auditor, the acting finance director and I have met with the auditor. We believe we have processes in place that will address those findings going forward.
There were no findings of malfeasance or anything like that?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Go back and look at the 2010, 2011, and 2012 ones and like compare them to now.
Yeah. Well, I know there used to be a whole bunch.
I mean,
of stuff like that.
it's amazing. And to what Omar was saying there, the work that Mary and Bessie and the folks have been doing, like they really stepped up. They really stepped up in a tough situation and helped out a lot there when it came to that, working with Omar and the staff there.
And then I guess for Bessie, final question maybe. Anything particularly outstanding or not good for the first half of this year?
Not that I'm aware of, Bill, no.
No? Okay. Okay, thanks. That's all.
Meeting is adjourned.